that probably has I don't want to say the biggest impact, but we probably deal with the most individuals and citizens with regards to zoning than anything else. You get a lot of interesting stories over the years on what the public may think zoning actually covers and what it might not cover. Sometimes I think they might believe it's a little more overreaching than it really is, and I think it's our viewpoint we don't want it to be more overreaching than it really needs to be when we consult with the municipalities. Just to give like some historical background, for zoning enforcement, the enabling legislation was the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code. It was adopted in the late 60s, which enabled municipalities to implement and gave them procedures to implement zoning ordinances. In this county, every municipality except Cold Spring Township has a zoning ordinance, of which 16 out of the 25 zoning ordinances are enforced by our department. So we do the permitting, we do the site evaluations, we do violation follow-ups, we attend the zoning hearings if people need a variance or a special exception to add on to their home, their business, establish a use if they're not in the right zoning district and so on. We also do a lot of outreach to the municipalities if they're adopting new zoning regulations. You know, we interact with them as far as workshop type activities to try to come up with some things that we feel are practical on a daily basis. A lot of the times consultants will put together regulations, zoning maps, so on, and we try to bridge that gap between the conceptual planning side of things and the day-to-day enforcement on what actually works on a day-to-day basis, of which Julie will probably elaborate a little bit more on what we do day-to-day. But the key to a solid zoning ordinance is, can you, in a practical manner, enforce it on a daily basis without just being overbearing on the public, and at the same time making it something that is actually that you can navigate. Sometimes the regulations, if you're talking about non-conforming uses like the old business in the residential neighborhood, or specifically floodplain regulations, which we got inundated with this past year with all the flooding properties and the properties with damage and that were destroyed. The floodplain regulations and dealing with the higher authorities of the state and the federal government can get a little complicated, and Julie will follow up on that too. I just wanted to give you a little bit of the historical background. Now, the municipalities, just before I pass it on, Julie, municipalities that we do take care of, that can be a very fluid list depending on the municipality. If they have a change of supervisors or council persons, they may decide they want to do enforcement on their own. We have some municipalities like South Lebanon, South Annville, North Londonderry that have been with us since the get-go. We're talking 4 decades worth of enforcement. We've had some that have always operated on their own. We have some that have kind of with us for a period of time, and then they do their own, and then they come back. So, and we try to keep an open door for that. That if a municipality is seeking assistance to do enforcement, that we'll try to be there for them. Our staff right now consists of Sung Kim, who's our zoning administrator, and Louis Rodriguez is our zoning officer. As Chris alluded to, I'd say probably half of our staff started off doing zoning enforcement when they initially got hired X number of years ago. So we all kind of have that background. So the new guys, when we have them, can always have people kind of to come to if they need an ear. So with that, I'll pass it on.
Yeah, I asked a question.
Oh, sure.
In that vein, at one time, did the county handle the enforcement for all the municipalities at one point in time, or no?
No.
Never?
No, not historically, we have not done every municipality.
And historically, were there more than what you're presently doing?
I think that's kind of fluctuated.
We've had, at one point I remember in the 90s, we had 18.
Okay.
And
So
we're at 16.
it's close.
It's as
not
Bob
like-
said, it's very much a fluid number.
And personnel change at the county level, in the commissioners and supervisors change, so they have differences of opinion.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the zoning enforcement activities allow our staff, not just Chris and I with what we do, but allows the other members of the staff too, not only to be familiar with the zoning hearing board members in the different municipalities, but also when they're doing enforcement, they get to interact with the solicitors and the supervisors of the council person. So it's a good way of networking also, so that people can put the names with the faces that are performing those activities for them.
All the municipalities have their own zoning hearing board though, right?
Correct. Yep. So if someone does need to go for a zoning hearing, we coordinate that. We take the petitions, we coordinate the hearings, we set them up, and we always have where we do the enforcement, we always have a zoning officer at the hearing.
Thank you.
Zoning, I think obviously the most, when people think about zoning or the planning department, I think, okay, well, if I want to do a project, I got to come down to the planning office and get a permit. So, you know, so when you think about zoning, pretty much if you're doing something to the exterior of your building, whether it's residential, commercial, institutional, you need a permit. Zoning ordinances are going to require permits for that. Interior work is not required. You know, so if you're fixing up a family room or painting or doing drywall, that kind of work does not require permits. But if you're building a new home, doing an addition, a pool, accessory structure of some sort, you know, all of those projects are going to require permits. So, the zoning officer, you know, the bulk of what we do is meeting with people on a daily basis that come in, bring the information about their project, and we issue permits to make sure that what they're doing is in conjunction or coordination with the zoning ordinance for that municipality. As Bob mentioned, it's not a countywide zoning ordinance, it's the local municipality's zoning regulations. So we're dealing with 16 different types of zoning ordinances. They basically have a kind of overall structure that's similar, but you know, in each ordinance you're going to have things that are different. So you know, really the task of the zoning officer is not to know what's in each of those ordinances, but where to you know, really the task of the zoning officer is not to know what's in each of those ordinances, but where to find it, and make sure, you know, that you know, that you're following that municipality's regulations, because they can vary, you know, from municipality to municipality. But other activities that a zoning officer does, we also have to do enforcement of violations of those regulations. You know, so if somebody calls in and says, well, we think something, you know, isn't right, you know, we have to go out on site, make an assessment of that, and if it is not in accordance with the regulations, then we have to follow up with violation activities. Typically, an enforcement letter explaining to the property owner what it is that they're in violation of, how they remedy that, and give a specific time frame in which that needs to be handled. I would have to say, yes. Yes.
You were talking about, I didn't want to
No,
interrupt
that's
your
okay.
flow, but
No, that's fine.
you were talking about the enforcement of the different ordinances in the
Yes.
different municipalities. It was my understanding that with our new comprehensive plan, there were suggested wording in ordinances which are posted on the website, and you kind of hope that municipalities would take advantage of that, so there would be some consistency of enforcement for the sake of the people enforcing that. Has there been any success in people actually using those models?
Well, I was going to talk about this kind of when I got to my portion, but that's okay. We can cover it now. It's an excellent question. As part of that planning, there are recommendations that come out of that, and what I hope to see is as these planning processes come to a conclusion, that we will be seeing the local zoning or the local municipalities adopting their zoning regulations, because the comp plan is kind of puts the thought out there. The zoning ordinance is the tool to make that happen. So again, I think that we're looking to do that, and
I guess that was part of what I was getting to, is that if there's something that's not there that you need, consulting with you will help to get a good zoning ordinance recommendation. Not that they have to follow it, but that you can post that then for other municipalities to utilize as well.
That's correct, yeah.
And then I guess the other thing that I wanted to make sure that, and maybe somebody else was going to say this or you were later, but even though we're administering all this, the final say still rests with the municipalities, because it's ultimately their responsibility.